Hello everybody and welcome to Purgatory Ironworks. I of course am your host Trenton, and today I'm going to give you a couple of quick tips on how to taper metal. Now, one of the most basic techniques in working steel is going to be tapering. It doesn't matter what you're going to be working on, whether it's a knife, whether it's a S-hook or a tent stake, you're going to be making a taper. And a lot of people don't understand a lot of the concept behind making a taper. Seems simple, but it's really not. So what I have here is a piece of plastiline clay. This is a non-hardening clay you get out of the art store. Now, it's been kind of roughed up in the shop, and it kind of looks like I fished it out of the toilet, but I promise I didn't. I've made it into a square block, and I'm going to use this as an example, an exaggerated example, of how to actually make a taper. Now, in a couple previous videos, I've somewhat referred to, and I've called attention to, how I was working just the end of that bar. And I want to show you this in a little bit more detail using the clay. Now this guy's about 1 inch square, and this is going to be our substitute piece of steel. So one thing that you need to understand about actually tapering is that the elongation is occurring here on the end. If I told you make me a taper that was 3 inches long, a lot of people would start with 3 inches of material and then work all along here. That is incorrect. The most elongation is occurring in the very tip here. This is what is extruding. So you don't want to think about as just this piece moving back. You got to think of that tip as just moving forward. Most people are used to working in 3 dimensions, cutting paper out, cutting wood out. And so if you need a 3-inch taper, you just cut away, you'd stock remove. But blacksmithing is different. You're working in mass, you're working in 3 dimensions. So watch this. Let's see if I can't put myself a mark right here. And let's say that we're going to make a 3-inch taper. So we're going to start right here. So watch this. Notice the angle of the hammer. Even though it's exaggerated, when you're making your first taper on your metal, you're going to do the same thing. Now we're just going to make a short taper. But we made about a 2-inch taper, and look where our mark is. So we really haven't moved anything but just this right here. It is very important to get that in your brain because it seems counterintuitive. When I tell people to make a taper, they want to work all of this back here. You don't do that. The work of the taper is in the front. Now, one of the reasons I suggest to most of my students is to always make the point first is because let's say this taper right here, let's say it's too shallow. We want it longer. So fine, don't touch that. Now we attack this area right here. Look how quickly now we have doubled the length of the taper, completely changing the angle, but really haven't touched this. Let's do it one more time. Now look at that. We have an almost 4-inch taper very easily. The vast majority of the work is going to be in this front section. So when you're working a taper, no matter how long you're going to make it, always start with this tip first. Bring it down to the point, and then you can work the material behind it to get the taper that you want. Let's fire up the forge, and let's do a quick example. Here we go. Notice again the extreme angle that I'm smacking it with the hammer. Now, I tend to rotate this all the way around, but notice when I get to there, I lift up so that the angles will match up. If you just keep it flat, you're going to have to bend that piece down every time you're ready to hit it. All right, there's the first heat there. I'm going to go ahead and take another heat. But again, you can see we've got angle on the hammer, and also I'm lifting this rod to make sure that I'm making contact with the anvil. And just to drive this home, if I put my rod flat, you see that gap under there? That means that in order to actually do any work, I now have to mush this down to the top of the anvil, but that right there saves all that problem. Let's take one more heat. We have our second heat. Now, I'm going to stop right there because that's a good size tip. And the other reason I'm stopping this is simply because once you get down to such a fine taper, what's going to happen is that your hammer is going to start hitting the anvil. That's when you're going to have to actually move this thing to the edge of the anvil to finish the taper, or use an anvil block of some type. But I'm good right there. But you can see now we have a good taper. It's a very blunt taper, something like you would use for a tent stake or something of that nature. But again, just like in the plasticine, what I want to do now is I'll take another heat and we're going to start actually elongating the taper. Just like we did in the clay, I'm going to attack this section right here. Again, I've got my tongs lifted just a little bit. Look how quickly the shape and the angle of that taper has changed. With just 2 or 3 series of hammer blows, all within the same heat, we have more than doubled the length of that taper. So this is a technique you're going to want to practice quite a bit. So it seems simple, and in essence it is. However, you're going to have a lot of practice to be able to do that as cleanly as I just did. Because the technique is good, but you're going to have to learn hammer control, and that's only going to come with muscle memory, time, and practice. So if you'll notice, when I swing the hammer, the blows are precise. However, for you, it's going to be a little more, simply going to take time, simply going to take practice. But follow the good techniques for tapering, do it a couple of 100,000 times, and you're going to be a pro. Thank you guys for watching.